The title of this next session is America's Connectivity Crisis. So we move from the pandemic crisis onto another crisis that I think we've covered over the past 8 months, this issue related to the digital divide and the impact on connectivity specifically and access to technology and how it's really leaving behind certain marginalized communities. At Techonomy, we've spent a lot of time looking at the homework gap, at how this has impacted students over the past 8 months, as many of them move to remote and distance learning and the impact that it's having on their ability to learn. But today, the conversation is going to be a little different. It's going to look at other communities and the need for connectivity and how that connectivity really could impact their health, their wealth, and also contribute back towards the greater economy. So thanks to Tom Kamber, who's the founder and executive director of Oats, and Clayton Banks, the co-founder and CEO of Silicon Harlem, for joining us today. So thank you, gentlemen. We'll go into sort of your backgrounds in a bit. But Tom, why don't you tell us, so Oats stands for Older Adults Technology Services. Tell us a little about sort of why you started the organization and sort of 16 years ago to now, how it's changed.
Sure, and thank you, Josh, for having us on today. And it's good to see Clayton, who I've worked with in the past, and this is our chance to get together, I guess. We're on a panel. He lives about 10 miles from where I'm sitting here in New York City, but it does not look like New York in the background. I started Oats 16 years ago because I was working on a project in Lower Manhattan after 9/11, and an 87-year-old woman approached me about our web launch to try to bring community members online. And she said, "I want to come to the party, but I'm not sure I would feel welcome." And I remember that just kind of setting off a bell in my head. I was an activist and looking to make the world a better place. And I thought, how could somebody not feel welcome because they were older, but they couldn't get on technology? Is it really that alienating? So I asked her to come to my office, and her name was Pearl Schur. She passed away about 5 years ago. But we worked together every week for a full year on Mondays, talking about technology and how to get her online and what she was getting out of it. And what I learned at the time was that older people felt really alienated and somewhat anxious about getting online. Only about 26% of seniors in 2004 had ever been on the internet. And we thought that we were going to close the gap fairly quickly. I started a nonprofit because there weren't a lot of groups working specifically on older adults and technology. And I remember some of our early foundations that we approached saying, geez, what are you going to do when all the seniors are online? Are you going to keep running the nonprofit? And I said, well, let's solve that. Let's answer that question when we get there. And that was 16 years ago. And today, still, seniors are lagging behind the general population by double digits, depending on how you characterize it, between 12 and 18 points behind the sort of general population in terms of internet access and use. About 42% of people lack internet at home. We've done a recent study showing that over 21 million older adults don't have wireline access at home during a pandemic. So this is a problem that is not going away. And I started Oats to try to solve it. We created all sorts of technology programs and trainings and launched a thing called Senior Planet about 8 years ago, which is an environment both in person and online where older people can come together to get training and then share their personal transformations using technology to age better. So we've got programs on the ground in 6 different states. We've trained over 60,000 people online during the pandemic, and we have a gigantic task ahead of us to get the rest of the people online right now.
Great, and we'll talk about sort of how we do that in a second. Clayton, you've joined us at a bunch of our events in the past. Really talked about some of these issues. But for those of the audience who aren't familiar with Silicon Harlem, give us a quick background on the organization.
Well, thank you very much, Josh. And I do want to say it's one of the great reasons why I continue to follow Techonomy. It's one of the few places you can find the word empathy and capitalism at the same time. So thanks, David, for that. And it's just a pleasure to be connected with Dr. Kamber, who's been at this wheel for so long that I admire him so much. So me as Silicon Harlem, our focus has been sort of thinking about these sort of low-income neighborhoods, some of these people that have been left behind in technology and often are trailing behind. And so I've put most of my effort on these type of areas, and particularly starting with Harlem. I'm fascinated with urban markets. I'm fascinated with cities. And I've been able to have the good fortune across the world seeing the similarities that you see with those who are suffering from a lack of connectivity. So Silicon Harlem is not only focused on seniors and those who are getting older and older, but we also are looking at it from an entire community and how we can sort of serve all of it, even within those unique populations. You know, young kids having their issues with access that impact their education, seniors who may even have a computer but don't have something upgraded, and the images aren't big enough, the fonts aren't big enough, all those type of things that Tom does all day long also matter. So we try to look at it from a comprehensive perspective, Josh, and we're trying to do our best to figure out how to close the gap of connectivity, one, but there's two other legs to that. There's not only the connectivity part, there's the access to a computer. That's very important in these communities. And there's digital literacy at stake. We cannot leave education behind. So that's sort of just a quick synopsis of Silicon Harlem.
And I think to that point, when we spoke, yesterday, you said, we all know the what and the why. Let's figure out the how. But the what and the why, Tom, when we spoke, I thought was interesting. Obviously, some of these barriers that are in front of people, especially in the aging population, there's a cost potential issue. There's an access and infrastructure issue, but one of the things you talked about was the education of the value of being connected, right? So I think, everyone on this call obviously takes for granted, all the amazing things we could do by being connected, from, health, financial services, access to information. And we require this. It is a need like electricity and water. But some of these generations and populations don't see it that way. Talk a little about sort of the education that's needed and why, they haven't yet been brought along to see the value of why they should be connected.
Sure. It's a great question. I think we have to start with this challenge that I think a lot of people don't appreciate how much ageism we have in America right now, and how much older adults are bombarded with negative stereotypes and feedback about themselves as older people. And so they're told in many cases, this new digital world isn't really for you. When they see an ad online or they watch a show on TV and people are online, they're typically younger, and the older people are often presented as sort of passive or feeble. And those messages are constantly reinforcing that seniors shouldn't be making this world their world as well. And so part of the challenge is coming up with challenging opportunities to challenge that narrative. There's a real effort to reframe how we talk about aging, and the technology sphere is a place to really make that change, so that people understand, first of all, I deserve to be online. I deserve to be shaping the world around me. I'm not I have an older friend. She's 93 years old. She just had her birthday. And I went to the house and she said, her name's Muriel. She looked at me, she said, I'm old, but I'm not dead. And I said, okay. She said, I want to be out there. I want to be making a difference. I want to be showing what I can do. She's a member of a UN committee right now, and she's working with people in Brazil using her technology as a way of shaping some of the policy around aging right now. And so we need to have that kind of value proposition linked to the effort to help older people live better and live more engaged lives in America today. And we've been doing surveys with people about technology, and what we're finding is that certainly cost and accessibility are part of the equation, but that sense of the value proposition, that sense of why older people are needed in the technology world, not that it's doing them a favor somehow to bring them online, but that we need the voices of older people helping to shape our public discourse online, helping to provide markets for the companies that are investing, and helping us have more efficient healthcare and social services and other kinds of economic processes. So it's kind of a group effort here, but I think we've got to make that value proposition clear and frame it in the context of what we need to do for older people and for aging, not just about the technology.
Right. And I think, obviously we talk a lot about the pandemic as a catalyst for accelerating some of this digital transformation and adoption of digital. Clayton, I think one of the things you told me is, you were speaking with a house of worship or a church, and actually being that they were unable to go on a Sunday to services actually what accelerated the adoption of a need. They didn't realize they needed connectivity or device. So have you seen again, as the pandemic came in, because obviously we talked about education, but in these, lower, income and, in these different areas, that the pandemic specifically has accelerated sort of, the demand and sort of the need for connectivity?
Yes, and in critical areas, right? So the things that we saw that increased dramatically was health. Talking about health and wealth, we're talking about health here as well. And in across the country, frankly, regardless of income, maybe 10% pre-pandemic we're doing telehealth. Now we're at 70 to 75%. However, in communities of color and those who are in low income, are still lagging way behind because they don't have the infrastructure to meet their doctors. And as a result, we're seeing higher levels of deaths, frankly, in those populations. The call I was on with a bunch of folks that were talking about, the church impact in the COVID era. One of the pastors who'd been at one of these churches for 40 years said this year was the first time pandemic made him get a computer for the first time in his life. And to Dr. Kamber's point, a lot of times we've mitigated to seniors, so we say, oh well, their grandkids will teach them, and they will. But what we're seeing is a big gap there, so education. It wasn't just the students in those households that were suffering. The teachers, they never had to do virtual teaching before, so that's been a big sort of learning curve for many of the people in our community and around all communities, frankly. And of course, just from a mental perspective, your job being at risk. Many of the folks that live in Harlem, for example, are essential workers that have to be around the subways and the buses and all these type of things. So the pandemic has accelerated, to your point, what and why. And now we're all working desperately how to bridge those gaps. That starts with connectivity. It has to deal with the devices, and certainly more and more what Dr. Kamber's been doing forever, which is bring that literacy to the population. Silicon Harlem, one particular way we're trying to do it is through virtual reality. We have a program right now running that helps health providers, Dr. Kamber, as well as any of the other health professionals you have today, Josh. We have a VR program that's 100% free that shows the workers how to wash their hands, how to don and doff their gowns, how to walk onto a floor that might be a COVID floor. And it's a safe situation. It's not like you're literally doing it. You're doing it in virtual reality, so you really learn. So, so many things have been accelerated due to the pandemic, to your point.
So right. So I think again, I think we mostly understand the what and the why, right? There's barriers to connectivity, the cost, the really articulating the value of why people who haven't yet connected should be connected. We've talked about some of the infrastructure challenges. Obviously, that not everywhere, especially in rural areas, is there even connectivity to these places. Obviously the why, everything from the sense of isolation, telehealth. So let's move on to the how, right? So I think we all agree this is a problem. It impacts a lot of different communities. Is this obviously you guys are doing great work in your areas. What is how do we address this? Is this is this something the government needs to step in? Is this a public-private partnership? Tom, talk a little about, I think some of the models, that other countries are looking at or implementing in how to provide services and connectivity. What are the differences and what are some of the things that we could learn and start to apply, here in the United States?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. About 2 years ago, I got a grant from an Australian investment bank, the Macquarie Group, which is focused on doing a lot of innovative programs around the world. And they had a research grant to study social innovation. And I was fortunate enough to be the recipient of that year and got to visit 8 different countries and look at what they were doing around technology and aging. And what I found was, on the one hand, some countries are really well ahead of us. South Korea has a really robust program, both for researching older adults and technology, and also actually for financing seniors going online. They have a subsidy for older people who are first-time technology users to help subsidize their internet access. But one of the things that they didn't have was really strong nonprofit innovators and leaders in their environments, the way that we do in the U.S. We have a very robust third sector here in the United States. And so the opportunity here to make a difference, I think, really involves a combination of government support, corporate sector work, and then the nonprofit social sectors, which includes philanthropy. And when COVID started, we reached out to the city of New York, and people are always criticizing government, talking about how we can't get anything done. But they called us and said, how can we get more seniors online who really need it right now? And we said, let's get the housing authority older adults online. We know where they are. We can connect them with technology. And the city committed to doing 10,000 tablets immediately, working with T-Mobile as the connectivity provider, on the condition that Oates would be able to deliver the training for those individuals that came online. And a week later, we had announced that program. And within a week after that, we already had 9,800 people on the phone that we were reaching out to get them those tablets. And those kinds of programs, which involve a nonprofit that can give the digital literacy and help with the sort of know-how about where do you find people who are in need and how do we reach them, together with the corporate sector that provides the devices, the connectivity, and in many cases, the market power to reach people, and government support with financing and with standard setting, has been really effective. And so we're working to roll that. I'll just tell you one more example that's pretty exciting. Humana has been a long-term partner of Oates. They're on our board, and they've been working with us on a campaign in San Antonio on social isolation for the last 3 years to help people become more socially connected. And they put together a COVID response pool of resources through the foundation. And they said, what can we do for seniors? And we said, listen, we have to focus on this connectivity program. Let's create a national campaign to get 1 million seniors online, and we want you to help us lead it. And so Humana gave us a grant for $3 million, which is a large grant for Oates. And we just signed on Comcast. We've got T-Mobile signed on. We've got Verizon signed on. We have the American Society on Aging working with us. We have AARP working with us on this. And we are developing a national initiative. Somebody asked in the chat about how we're working on marketing. We're now hiring national marketing leadership companies. These are companies that work providing the biggest US-based programs to really to do marketing and advertising and PR and public affairs. And we're harnessing their power with these corporate partners to reach hundreds of thousands of people in the next few months.
Great. Yeah, no, I think, the marketing part and the adherence too, right? I mean, it's great that, to your point, you can get the device, and I know Clayton will talk a little about the device as well, but you can get it into the hands of the people. But if it sits in the box and they don't feel comfortable using it, it's actually a wasted resource, right, where it could be probably put in the hands of someone who's going to use it. So the education is really important. Clayton, you could talk a little about, so obviously it is the connectivity, it is the device as well. I think one of the things we talked about, and again, we go back to this idea of government, and someone made a comment in one of the last sessions about Ajit Pai stepping down from the FCC yesterday. And actually, I think happened when one of us was on the call. You talked a little about this idea of municipal broadband, right? How can a city or a state bring broadband services? But really, right now, the states aren't able to do that because of current regulation, legislation. Talk a little about where you think the government can play a role, and do you think that will change under the next administration? Will we see potentially the idea of a municipal broadband?
It's certainly a great opportunity with the change in the administration, which will reform the FCC. I always say there's 5 people on earth that control all communications of America, and that's the FCC. So, and a very powerful commission there. So we have a great opportunity. We have a great window to do what I think must be done for America. Everyone has to have a connection in the home. 0 unconnected. It's like water and electricity, as you made the point earlier. So that has to be done. The question becomes, how do you do it? And it's going to be a mix moving forward. One of them will be the private sector that currently provides, broadband to as many places as it can get, but the problem has been the price. So in Harlem, 40% of people do not have broadband in the home. I said 40%, okay? That's crazy. However, we've been able to work with the city to talk about Silicon Harlem over the last 4 years have been preparing to launch an internet service providing of our own, which would provide broadband to any home and every apartment in New York City for free. That's what I said, Dr. Kamber, free. And the reason why it has to be free is because everybody has to have it regardless of your wealth, regardless of your income. How do you do it? Well, the good news is, and I worked in the business most of my career, where we had to dig ditches and pull infrastructure and destroy buildings to get this stuff in, cost us, maybe the industry cost, probably has put $1 trillion in this country. It's 1% of the cost to deploy it now. Because of the advance in wireless connectivity, because of the advance of fiber, it's much easier to do. And so we are able to do that without having to be burdened with video, which has cost a lot of money for the incumbents. So there's no reason for us to kick the incumbents out. Lots of people still like that service, but for everyone to have it, Josh, we have to create it accessible. And there's a way to do that. We're launching our ISP in February, and we're very excited about it. We want Techonomy to be a part of that. But we're actually doing that not just in New York, but across this nation. Tribal lands, rural, everywhere, we'll find a new way that we are providing internet that everyone gets in. I wish I could tell more and more and more about the how, but everyone on the call, which is over 100 people, would have to sign an NDA, and we're not going to worry about that right now. But I will say it's coming to your instincts. It's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. There's no way New York City, there's no way New York State can say, oh, we're the greatest city in the world and we're the smartest city in the world. And you can't do that if someone is not connected. Everyone needs to be connected, and New York should be that leading city, and the state should be the leading state in this country and the world, because the whole world's doing it. It's not just us that has to do it. The entire world has to do it.
And I think one of the things you brought up when we spoke is you don't want to create these second-class digital citizens, right? There are services out there that are low cost that really don't provide the speed that is necessary nowadays to access the internet and live on in digital like we currently do, right? So when we talk about providing access, it really is at that same level that everyone else, the people on this call do sort of have access at. So because we only have another minute or so, Tom, anything for this group? I know you're building your coalition, your ecosystem, looking for businesses who are looking to support this. How can people sort of help participate? I know we did talk about it is Giving Tuesday, and hopefully we'll include that link for Oats. But how should people be thinking about sort of supporting these initiatives?
Well, I think there's a couple quick ways. First of all, thanks for mentioning Giving Tuesday. When you asked if I could do this panel, and I realized I'm going to be in front of all these fantastic organizations and potential supporters out there. Seniorplanet.org is the main site for people accessing all of our content and programs. And if you go to seniorplanet.org right now, you'll see there's a link to Giving Tuesday. We are rapidly closing in on our goal for raising more money than we've ever raised before on Giving Tuesday from individuals. And we're pretty excited about the progress we're making. People that want to email me directly can just email info@oats.org, OATS.org, and I'll get the email. It'll get passed right to me. And we're looking for partnerships both at the community level and at the national level, corporate, philanthropic, government. We have mayors like San Antonio and Houston and other cities that are signing a mayor's pledge about getting their city up behind this effort to promote people getting online and getting engaged. And then we're working with some of the telecoms companies to create lower cost offerings. As Clayton is saying, there needs to be a collaboration to get this stuff into people's living rooms at an affordable price. Free is great. Clayton, if you can get out there with free, I'm signing up right now with my household. In the meantime, I'm working with anybody that we can do to make it more affordable and more accessible for people, and also help them make that transition. So seniorplanet.org has weekly trainings around Zoom and connectivity for older adults. So you can sort of flip through those and see what's appropriate for people. And also we have a hotline on seniorplanet.org where people can just call in and get help with any questions they've got. We have 82 trainers and people that are helping out online. So people can give people real-time support and coaching on the phone about how to handle their technology. And that sounds a little weird, like you're on the phone telling somebody how to get on with video and their computer, but it's actually working really well. We have a net promoter score over 90 right now for people going through the program. So it's working really well.
Great. So yeah, I shared the planet.org link in the chat for everyone. So Clayton, you shared your information. You're always open to connecting with people. Any closing remarks? There was a question in the chat earlier about, do you know how one does apply for assistance in New York? If they do, I don't know if that's specifically around connectivity. Are there currently programs that the state or the city are subsidizing, Clayton? Is that something you know about, or?
Well, the incumbents have a variety of temporary programs that you can apply to for, sort of delaying the price for data, for example, if you want to use your cell phone for these type of things, and in some cases have great specials for broadband. They don't last, and as you said earlier, a lot of times those programs are so slow you can hardly use an email. So I encourage people to, get in touch with me. We're deploying networks all over the place. Already have the largest contiguous outdoor network in the city. So there's a lot of ways that we can be of help. And I'll end with this, Josh, if you don't mind. One of the things that I want people to realize on this call, because I love everybody on this call, always have the best audiences at Techonomy. If we leave people behind, it hurts all of us. If we help people behind, it helps all of us. This is not a zero-sum game. I lost my sister to cancer last year, and I believe there's somebody in the neighborhood that could have solved cancer by now, if only they had the resources. This is not a zero-sum game, people. This is an incredibly important thing we have to get done. If you want to help me, email me, please, because this is an important thing for all of our lives. This isn't just, I have internet, what's the big deal? Well, your next door neighbor or the person a mile away that might not have it might be the very same person that ends up having to go into a life of crime. We don't need that. You know what I mean? None of us need that. So let's figure out a way to do this together. And you're right, Josh, it's probably going to have to include the public and the private. I like to say the private and the public, because we have the know-how to get it done. We need the public to support it so we can do it comprehensively. So thank you, Josh, for today. This was a great call. I could go on for another, and especially with the yoga.
We love your passion. This is your passion is infectious. I think that's why we love having you participate. I think, really bringing to the forefront these important topics, and there's David, we really enjoy always, having you. So Tom, Clayton, thanks again for joining us. And hopefully we'll be able to continue this conversation in 2021.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much.